The gunshot echoed across the valley as Olivia Kane ducked behind a fallen log, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 days on the trail alone, and already she'd encountered more trouble than in all her 22 years in Boston. She clutched her father's pocket watch, the only possession of value she had left, and prayed the bandits would assume she'd fled in another direction. Wyoming Territory, 1878, was proving to be exactly as wild as the name suggested. "I know you're out there, miss," called a gruff voice. "We just want to help a lady in distress." The laughter that followed told Olivia exactly what kind of help they intended to offer. She clutched her small pistol tighter, though she'd never fired it at anything more threatening than a practice target. Her father had insisted she learn before embarking west, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of desperate men in a lawless frontier. As footsteps crunched through the underbrush, Olivia calculated her options. 3 men against 1 woman with limited ammunition and even less experience. The mathematics weren't favorable. A horse whinnied in the distance, not one of the bandits' mounts, but something else. The footsteps paused. "Someone's coming," one of the men hissed. Hoofbeats approached rapidly, followed by a deafening blast that Olivia recognized as a shotgun. The bandits scattered, cursing. More shots followed, and then silence. "You can come out now, madam," called a deep voice, different from the bandits. "They've gone." Olivia remained frozen behind the log. This could be another trick. "I understand your caution," the voice continued, closer now. "But I give you my word as a gentleman that I mean no harm. My name is Yates Sloane. I have a ranch about 5 miles east of here." Something in his steady tone compelled Olivia to peek over the log. A tall man sat atop a dappled gray stallion, shotgun resting across his thighs. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble. "Are they gone?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those particular vultures?" "Yes. But there are plenty more where they came from." He dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping a respectful distance. "May I ask what you're doing out here alone, miss?" "Kane. Olivia Kane." She slowly stood, brushing dirt from her once fine traveling dress. "I was on the stagecoach to Sweetwater, but we were robbed yesterday. The driver was killed, and I've been walking since." Yates Sloane's expression darkened. "The Finley gang. They've been growing bolder." He glanced at the setting sun. "Sweetwater's still 15 miles west. You won't make it before dark, and these woods aren't safe at night." Olivia squared her shoulders. "I have little choice, Mr. Sloane. I have an appointment to keep." "What business brings a lady like yourself to Sweetwater, if you don't mind my asking?" "Employment," she said, lifting her chin slightly. "I'm to be a cook at the Elkhorn Ranch." Something flashed across his face, surprise, perhaps. "The Elkhorn is my property, Miss Kane, and I don't recall hiring a cook." Olivia felt her face flush. "I have a letter from Mr. Howard Jenkins confirming the position." "Howard Jenkins is my foreman," Yates said with a frown. "He doesn't have authority to hire staff without consulting me." Olivia's hope plummeted. She'd spent every penny getting to Wyoming, believing a position awaited her. Her father's debts had forced her to sell their home after his death, and with no relatives willing to take her in, the cooking position had seemed providential. "I see," she said stiffly, fighting back tears. "Then I apologize for the misunderstanding." Yates studied her for a long moment. "How did you come to correspond with Jenkins?" "My father was acquainted with him years ago. When I wrote explaining my circumstances, Mr. Jenkins offered me the position." Yates sighed, removing his hat to run fingers through dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Jenkins has a soft heart. Too soft for his own good sometimes." "He mentioned you needed help," Olivia said desperately. That with 15 ranch hands to feed, your current arrangement wasn't sufficient. That much is true. He replaced his hat. But what Jenkins failed to understand is that I need a wife more than I need a cook. Olivia's eyes widened. I beg your pardon. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Not a proposal, Miss Kane, merely a statement of fact. A ranch this size needs a woman's touch, someone to manage the household, not just prepare meals. I see, Olivia said, though she didn't entirely. Well, I'm sure Sweetwater must have other establishments requiring kitchen help. Perhaps, but you won't find out tonight. He gestured to his horse. I can offer you shelter at the Elkhorn until tomorrow. Then we can sort this misunderstanding. Olivia hesitated. Accepting his invitation meant placing herself entirely at the mercy of a stranger. Yet she had few alternatives, and he had just saved her from certain harm. I would be grateful, she finally said. Yates nodded and extended a hand to help her mount. His grip was strong and calloused a working man's hand. Once she was settled, he swung up behind her, maintaining a respectful distance despite the proximity forced by sharing a saddle. As they rode east, Olivia tried to ignore the solid presence at her back and the strange flutter in her stomach. Each time the horse's gait pressed her briefly against him. Boston seemed a lifetime away now, and the future she had planned dissolved with each passing mile into the Wyoming wilderness. The main house of the Elkhorn Ranch came into view just as darkness fell, a substantial two-story structure built of sturdy logs with a wide covered porch. Light glowed from several windows, and smoke curled from a stone chimney. To Olivia's surprise, it appeared more civilized than she had imagined a frontier ranch might be. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, gray-haired and sturdy, with a weathered face that suggested years of frontier life. Mrs. Larson, Yates called as he helped Olivia dismount. We have an unexpected guest. The woman hurried down the steps, keen eyes assessing Olivia from head to toe. Land sakes, child, you look half-starved and wholly exhausted. Come inside before you catch your death. Olivia found herself ushered into a warm kitchen where the aroma of beef stew made her stomach growl embarrassingly. Mrs. Larson chuckled and immediately set about ladling a generous portion into a bowl. This is Mrs. Larson, Yates explained, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. She comes from town 3 days a week to cook and clean. The other days, the men fend for themselves with varying degrees of success. And who might you be, dear? Mrs. Larson asked, placing the steaming bowl before Olivia. Olivia Kane. She glanced uncertainly at Yates. Miss Kane came expecting a position as cook, he supplied. It seems Jenkins took it upon himself to hire her. Mrs. Larson's eyebrows rose. Did he now? That explains his questions about whether I might be willing to retire. She huffed. At 72, I've earned the right to decide when I'm done. Thank you very much. Nobody's replacing you, Mrs. Larson, Yates assured her. There's been a misunderstanding, that's all. The older woman studied Olivia with a shrewd gaze. Well, misunderstanding or not, the girl needs rest. I've aired out the spare room upstairs. It's small but clean. Thank you, Olivia said gratefully, spooning the rich stew into her mouth. It was the first real meal she'd had in days. Mrs. Larson nodded and turned to Yates. Jenkins rode into town with some of the boys. Said they needed supplies, but more likely they're wetting their whistles at Delaney's. Yates frowned. I need to speak with him about this matter. Will you be all right here with Mrs. Larson, Miss Kane? Of course, Olivia said, though inwardly she worried what would happen when he confronted his foreman about overstepping. After Yates departed, Mrs. Larson sat across from Olivia with a cup of coffee. Now then, child, tell me your story, and don't spare the details. Something in the woman's kind but no-nonsense manner reminded Olivia of her grandmother. And before she knew it, she was pouring out the whole tale: her father's death, the discovery of his gambling debts, the loss of their Boston home, and her desperate correspondence with Howard Jenkins. "I sold everything except a few clothes and my mother's silver hairbrush," she finished. "The stagecoach robbery took most of my money. I had hoped—" She swallowed hard. "I had hoped to start anew here." Mrs. Larson patted her hand. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, child. Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better." "It's difficult to see how this particular turn could be for the better," Olivia said ruefully. "You survived bandits twice in 2 days. I'd count that as fortune smiling upon you." The older woman refilled Olivia's bowl. "As for employment, Sweetwater's growing. Sheriff Reeves's wife runs a dress shop that could use help, and the hotel is always short-staffed. I'm a decent cook, but my real skill is with numbers," Olivia admitted. "Father insisted I learn bookkeeping to help with his import business." Mrs. Larson's eyes lit up. "Is that so? Now that's interesting." Before Olivia could ask what she meant, the kitchen door opened, admitting a blast of cool night air and a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard. He stopped short at the sight of Olivia. "Evening, Mrs. Larson," he said, removing his hat. "I didn't realize we had company." "This is Miss Olivia Kane," Mrs. Larson said with pointed emphasis. "She's had quite the journey to reach us." The man's face paled slightly. "Miss Kane, I'm Howard Jenkins." He cleared his throat. "I see you've arrived safely." "No thanks to your letter offering a position that doesn't exist," came Yates's voice as he appeared behind Jenkins. His expression was stern but controlled. Jenkins winced. "I can explain, boss. I'm counting on it." Yates gestured toward his study. "Mrs. Larson, perhaps you could show Miss Kane to her room. She's had a trying day." As the men disappeared into another part of the house, Mrs. Larson guided Olivia upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom. A quilted bed, washstand, and simple wooden dresser comprised the furnishings, but after days on the trail it looked like luxury. "Don't you fret about those two," Mrs. Larson said, turning down the bed covers. "Jenkins means well, and Yates has a fair head on his shoulders. Rest now. Things often look brighter by morning light." Alone in the unfamiliar room, Olivia changed into her nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed, combing her long auburn hair with her mother's silver brush. Through the floorboards, she could hear the muffled sounds of men's voices, sometimes rising in apparent disagreement, then falling again to indistinguishable murmurs. Her future hung in the balance of their discussion, yet exhaustion soon overcame worry. Olivia slipped between the clean sheets and fell into the deepest sleep she'd known since leaving Boston. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through curtainless windows and the distant sounds of a working ranch coming to life. Olivia dressed quickly in her second-best dress, a navy blue cotton with only minimal travel wear, and made her way downstairs, following the aroma of coffee and bacon. She found Yates alone in the kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled up as he tended a skillet of eggs. He looked up at her entrance, those striking blue eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "Good morning, Miss Kane. I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you." She hesitated in the doorway. "May I help with breakfast, please?" He gestured toward the stove. "Mrs. Larson won't be in until noon, and my culinary skills are limited at best." Olivia stepped forward, taking the spatula he offered. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected tingle up her arm. She focused intently on the eggs, willing her heartbeat to steady. "I owe you an apology," Yates said after a moment. "I should have handled yesterday's revelation with more grace. You traveled a great distance based on a promise made in good faith." "Mr. Jenkins overstepped," Olivia acknowledged. "The fault isn't yours." Perhaps, but the outcome affects you most severely. He poured coffee into 2 mugs. Jenkins explained his reasoning. Apparently, my sister wrote to him expressing concern about my bachelor existence and suggested I needed, and I quote, a woman's civilizing influence. Olivia couldn't help but smile. Sisters often take such liberties. Indeed, Clara means well, but she forgets that running a cattle ranch leaves little time for social calls and courting. He handed her a mug. Jenkins, in his wisdom, decided hiring a female cook might satisfy my sister's concerns while addressing our very real need for consistent meals. A logical solution, Olivia said carefully, sliding eggs onto plates. Logical but incomplete. Yates leaned against the counter, studying her. As I mentioned yesterday, what the Elkhorn truly needs is someone to manage the entire household, not just cooking, but accounts, supplies, correspondence. The business side of ranching grows more complex each year. Olivia set the plates on the table. That sounds more like the role of a wife than an employee. Typically, yes. He gestured for her to sit. But I'm proposing something different. Jenkins tells me you have experience with bookkeeping. Surprised, Olivia nodded. I managed my father's accounts for several years. Then I have a proposition for you, Miss Kane. He took a seat across from her. Work for me not just as a cook, but as a household manager. Help with the accounts, oversee supplies, manage correspondence. In return, I offer fair wages, room and board, and my protection. Olivia stared at him. You hardly know me, Mr. Sloane. I know you survived a stagecoach robbery and kept your wits about you when confronted by bandits. I know you traveled across the country alone seeking honest work. Those facts speak to your character. He sipped his coffee. Try the position for 1 month. If it doesn't suit either of us, I'll personally ensure you have the means to establish yourself elsewhere. It was more than she had dared hope for after yesterday's disappointment, yet something in his phrasing gave her pause. You mentioned protection, she said carefully. From what exactly? Yates's expression turned grave. The West isn't Boston, Miss Kane. A woman alone faces dangers beyond the obvious bandits and wild animals. There are men in these parts who view unattached females as fair game for advances wanted or otherwise. And your employment would signal I'm not unattached, precisely. As part of my household, you'd have the protection of my name and reputation. He studied her reaction. It's not a perfect solution, but it's practical. Olivia considered his offer. The position would provide security while allowing her to use skills beyond cooking. Yet it also placed her in close proximity to a man who already affected her composure more than she cared to admit. What would Mrs. Larson think of this arrangement? She asked. Yates smiled slightly. It was her suggestion. She's been wanting to reduce her duties for some time, but worried about leaving me to the mercy of my own cooking, as she put it. I see. Olivia took a breath. Very well, Mr. Sloane. I accept your offer on a trial basis. Excellent. He extended his hand across the table, and they shook on the agreement, a businesslike gesture that nevertheless sent another ripple of awareness through her. Welcome to the Elkhorn, Miss Kane. The first week at the Elkhorn passed in a whirlwind of activity as Olivia settled into her new role. The ranch operated like a small village, with 15 permanent hands, seasonal workers, and various suppliers and buyers coming and going. Mrs. Larson proved an invaluable mentor, teaching Olivia the rhythms of ranch life while gradually ceding kitchen duties to her. The account books, however, presented a greater challenge. Years of haphazard record-keeping had left the ranch's financial situation murky at best. This is impossible, Olivia muttered on her 5th night, surrounded by ledgers in Yates's study. How can anyone know if the ranch is profitable when expenses are recorded so inconsistently? Is it that bad? Yates asked from the doorway, startling her. He'd been out with the hands all day and trail dust still clung to his clothes. Worse, she admitted. Your previous system seems to have been. Well, there was no system. Bills are recorded in at least 3 different places, cattle sales noted sporadically, and expenses for the house mixed with those for the ranch, he grimaced. Jenkins did his best, but numbers aren't his strength. Clearly. She showed him a page where figures had been crossed out multiple times, rendering the total unreadable. With your permission, I'd like to establish a new record-keeping method, separate ledgers for ranch operations and household expenses, monthly reconciliation, and proper documentation of all transactions. Yates studied her with that intensity that still made her pulse quicken. You're proposing quite an overhaul. It's necessary if you want to know the true financial state of your business, she said firmly. A slow smile spread across his face. I knew you were the right choice, Miss Kane. You have my full permission to implement whatever changes you deem necessary. His confidence in her abilities warmed something deep inside. Thank you, Mr. Sloane. Yates, he corrected. If we're to work closely together, such formality seems excessive. Then you must call me Olivia, she replied, surprised by her own boldness. Olivia, he repeated, and something in the way her name sounded in his deep voice made her cheeks flush. Don't work too late. Even accountants need sleep. After he left, Olivia remained at the desk, distracted by the lingering scent of leather and pine that seemed to follow him. She was developing a dangerous habit of noticing such things about Yates Sloane, the way sunlight brought out auburn highlights in his dark hair, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the surprising gentleness of his hands when passing her items across the table. Such observations were inappropriate for an employee, she reminded herself sternly. Her position depended on maintaining professional boundaries, regardless of how her heart fluttered when he entered a room. The second week brought a trip to Sweetwater for supplies. Yates insisted on accompanying her, citing the continued threat from the Finley gang who had yet to be apprehended after the stagecoach robbery. Sweetwater proved larger than Olivia had expected, a bustling town with wooden sidewalks, a proper hotel, several saloons, and various businesses lining the main street. As their wagon rolled past the sheriff's office, Yates called a greeting to a tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest. Sheriff Reeves, he explained to Olivia. Good man in a tight spot. They stopped first at the general store, where Olivia presented the extensive list she had compiled. The proprietor, Mr. Simmons, raised his eyebrows at the quantity. Restocking the entire Elkhorn, are you, Sloane? Miss Kane is bringing order to our chaos, Yates replied with a hint of pride that made Olivia stand a little straighter. As Mr. Simmons gathered their order, whispers and curious glances followed Olivia through the store. When Yates stepped outside to speak with a cattle buyer, a plump woman in a floral dress approached. You must be the Boston girl staying at the Elkhorn, she said without preamble. I'm Margaret Wilson, wife of the banker. Olivia Kane, she replied, extending her hand. How do you do, Mrs. Wilson's handshake was brief, her assessment thorough. We don't often see new faces in Sweetwater, especially educated Eastern ladies. People are naturally curious about your arrangement with Mr. Sloane. The implication in her tone was unmistakable. Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. I'm employed as Mr. Sloane's household manager and bookkeeper. Mrs. Larson can attest to the propriety of the situation. Of course, Mrs. Wilson said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though many wondered why a bachelor would hire a young, unmarried woman when the town has several widows with experience managing households. Perhaps because I also have experience with accounting, Olivia replied coolly. If you'll excuse me, I need to complete our purchases." She turned away, heart pounding. Mrs. Wilson's insinuations weren't entirely unexpected. Olivia had anticipated some gossip, but the reality of facing such judgment was still unsettling. When they left the store, Yates must have noticed her distress. Did something happen inside? "Nothing important," she said, unwilling to repeat the woman's implications. Yates frowned. "Margaret Wilson, I presume? She fancies herself the arbiter of Sweetwater's morality. You overheard. No need. Her disapproving glare through the window told me enough." He helped her onto the wagon seat. "I should have warned you about the town's propensity for gossip. It's no different from Boston in that regard," Olivia said with forced lightness. "Though there, at least, I had the protection of family name and history." Yates was quiet for a moment as he guided the horses down the street. "Does it bother you? What people might think?" "I'd be lying if I said it didn't," she admitted. "But I know the truth of our arrangement, and that must suffice." He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "If the gossip becomes too burdensome, we could consider alternatives. Such as, you could take a position in town. The bank needs a clerk, and Sheriff Reeves mentioned his wife is expanding her dress shop." The suggestion stung more than it should have. "Are you dissatisfied with my work, Mr. Sloane?" "Not in the slightest," he said quickly. "But I won't have you suffering for my convenience." "It's my choice to make," she said firmly. "And I choose to honor our agreement." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "Then we'll weather the gossip together." Their final stop was the post office, where a letter from Yates's sister Clara awaited. He read it as they started the journey back to the ranch, his expression growing increasingly amused. "It seems news travels fast," he said, folding the letter. "Clara has heard about my Boston bookkeeper and demands to know if you're suitable." "Suitable for what?" Olivia asked, confused. "For becoming her sister-in-law, I imagine." He chuckled at her startled expression. "Clara has spent the last 5 years trying to marry me off. She'll interpret your presence at the Elkhorn as a sign her campaign is working." "Should I be concerned about receiving a proposal alongside my wages?" Olivia teased, trying to hide how the mere suggestion flustered her. "Only if my bookkeeping improves dramatically." He returned with a grin that transformed his usually serious face. The jest carried them through the remainder of the journey, but later that night, as Olivia prepared for bed, Mrs. Wilson's insinuations and Clara's assumptions mingled uncomfortably in her mind. Both women had arrived at similar conclusions about her position at the Elkhorn, albeit from different perspectives. More troubling was her own reaction. The idea of being considered a potential wife for Yates should have alarmed her. Instead, it had planted a seed of possibility that refused to be uprooted by rational thought. "This is madness," she whispered to her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. "You've known the man barely 2 weeks." Yet in those 2 weeks, she had observed more about Yates Sloane than she had learned about suitors in Boston after months of formal courtship. She had seen his fairness with the ranch hands, his gentleness with injured animals, his quick mind in business dealings, and his unexpected humor when relaxed among those he trusted. Such dangerous thoughts. Olivia splashed cold water on her face and firmly redirected her mind to tomorrow's tasks. Romance had no place in her current circumstances. Survival and security must remain her priorities. The 3rd week brought a telegram from the bank in Boston, confirming that her father's final debts had been settled with the sale of their home. The message should have brought relief, but instead left Olivia with a hollow feeling. The last ties to her former life were now severed. She was still contemplating this when Yates found her on the porch that evening. "Bad news?" he asked, noting the telegram in her hand. "Not exactly." She explained the situation. It's just final now. There's truly nothing to go back to. He leaned against the porch railing. Do you want to go back? No, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Boston holds painful memories now. But it was home for so long and I haven't quite found my place here yet. You will, he said with quiet confidence. The West has a way of claiming people who give it a chance. He studied her for a moment. Would you like to see more of it? I need to check the North Pasture tomorrow. Its good riding country might help you feel more connected to this land. The invitation felt significant somehow. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, my riding skills are rudimentary at best. We have gentle mounts, he assured her, and I'm a patient teacher. The morning dawned clear and cool, perfect riding weather. Olivia dressed in her most practical skirt and a borrowed pair of boots from Mrs. Larson that were slightly too large but serviceable. Yates was waiting at the stables, where he introduced her to a dappled mare named Daisy. She's steady and forgiving, he explained, helping Olivia mount. Perfect for a city girl finding her seat. I resent that characterization, Olivia said with mock indignation. I'll have you know I rode in the Boston Common at least twice a year. His laugh, rich and unreserved, warmed her more than the morning sun. My humble apologies, Miss Kane. Clearly, I've underestimated your equestrian prowess. They set out at an easy pace, Yates riding his gray stallion, Thunder, beside her. As they left the immediate vicinity of the ranch buildings, the landscape opened before them, rolling hills covered in sage and grass stretching toward distant mountains. It's beautiful, Olivia breathed. So vast and open. That's what captured me when I first came here, Yates said, watching her reaction. I was 17, working as a drover for a cattle outfit. The moment I saw these Wyoming skies, I knew I'd found where I belonged. How did you come to own the Elkhorn? Luck, hard work, and a good mentor. He pointed toward a distant line of cottonwoods. The original owner, Samuel Hayes, had no children. I started as a hand, became his foreman, and eventually, when his health failed, he offered to sell me the ranch on terms I could manage. I've spent the last 8 years expanding the operation and paying off the purchase. You've accomplished a great deal for a man of 30, Olivia observed. 32, he corrected with a smile, and there's still much to do. The railroad's coming closer each year, which means new markets, but also new challenges. They rode for nearly an hour, cresting a hill that offered a panoramic view of the Elkhorn's northern range. Cattle dotted the landscape, black specks against the green gold grass. This is my favorite spot on the property, Yates said, dismounting and helping Olivia down. You can see almost the entire northern section from here. They stood side by side, the horses grazing nearby as Yates pointed out landmarks: a creek that never ran dry, an outcropping where mountain lions sometimes denned, the distant line marking the property boundary. It's magnificent, Olivia said sincerely. I understand now why you love it so much. It's more than the land, he said thoughtfully. It's the life it offers, challenging but rewarding. Everything you build here, you build with your own hands. Including your future, she added. Yes. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Though lately I've been thinking that future might be rather empty without someone to share it. Before Olivia could process his words, a rider appeared in the distance, approaching rapidly. Yates's hand moved instinctively to the rifle in his saddle holster. That's Jenkins, he said, tension easing from his shoulders as he recognized his foreman. Something must be wrong for him to ride out this far. Jenkins reined in his lathered horse, face grim. Boss, we've got trouble. Finley and his boys hit the Sullivan place last night. Sullivan's hurt bad and they took most of his stock. Yates's expression hardened. Is the sheriff forming a posse? Heading out at noon. Thought you'd want to join." "I do." He glanced at Olivia, conflict evident in his eyes. "Miss Kane, go," she said immediately. "I can find my way back to the ranch." "Not alone," he said firmly. "Jenkins will escort you." "I need to get back to gather the men," Jenkins protested. Yates considered for a moment. "The ridge trail is safest and most direct. We'll all ride together until we reach the fork. Then Jenkins and I will continue to town while you return to the ranch." The peaceful morning shattered. They mounted quickly and rode at a much faster pace than before. Olivia clung to her saddle, determined not to slow them down despite her limited experience. At the fork in the trail, Yates pulled alongside her. "Stay inside the ranch buildings until we return. The Finley gang is unpredictable. They could be anywhere." "Be careful," she said, unable to mask her concern. Something intense passed between them, unspoken words hanging in the air. Then Yates reached across the space between their horses and briefly clasped her hand. "I'll return," he promised, before turning thunder toward town. Olivia watched until they disappeared from view, an unfamiliar dread settling in her stomach. The Finley gang had already demonstrated their brutality with the stagecoach robbery. The thought of Yates facing such men filled her with a fear more profound than any she had experienced for herself. Back at the ranch, Mrs. Larson shared her concern. "Those Finley boys are vicious," she said as they prepared dinner for the remaining hands. "Raised mean by a meaner father, and now they've gathered every piece of trash from here to the Dakota Territory." "Surely the sheriff's posse has the advantage," Olivia said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Numbers, maybe, but the Finleys know every cave and canyon in these parts." The older woman squeezed Olivia's shoulder. "Don't fret too much, child. Yates Sloane is no stranger to danger, and he's got a level head on his shoulders." Nevertheless, Olivia found sleep impossible that night. She sat by her window, watching the moonlit yard for any sign of returning riders. Dawn broke with no news, and the day stretched endlessly as she tried to occupy herself with household tasks. It was past sunset when hoofbeats finally sounded in the yard. Olivia rushed to the porch, heart in her throat, to see Yates dismounting from a weary thunder. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him apparently unharmed, followed immediately by embarrassment at the intensity of her reaction. "You're back," she said, stating the obvious, as promised. His voice was rough with exhaustion, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "Did everything remain quiet here?" "Yes. Did you?" She hesitated, unsure how to ask about the posse's success. "We recovered most of Sullivan's cattle, but Finley and his core group escaped into the high country." Frustration colored his tone. "They know those mountains better than we do." Mrs. Larson appeared behind Olivia. "There's hot food in the kitchen, Mr. Sloane, and I've prepared a bath in the washroom." "You're a saint, Mrs. Larson." He trudged up the steps, the weariness in his movements now evident. As he passed Olivia, she noticed a dark stain on his shirt sleeve. "You're hurt." "It's nothing. A graze." "Let me see," she insisted, reaching for his arm. "After I've eaten and bathed," he countered. "I've been in the saddle for nearly 2 days straight. Blood can wait, my stomach and nose cannot." Olivia reluctantly conceded, following him into the kitchen where Mrs. Larson served a hearty stew. She hovered nearby, unable to completely dispel her concern until she had assessed his injury herself. Later, when Yates emerged from the washroom in clean clothes, his damp hair curling slightly at his neck, Olivia was waiting with bandages and antiseptic. "It really is just a graze," he protested, as she insisted on examining his arm. "Humor me," she said firmly. "I've seen minor wounds become serious infections." He submitted with a sigh, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a shallow cut about 3 inches long on his upper arm. Bullet passed close enough to tear the shirt and skin, but nothing more. Olivia cleaned the wound carefully, acutely aware of the firm muscle beneath her fingers and the warmth of his skin. How did it happen? Ambush in a narrow pass. We were expecting it, but one of the younger hands spooked and gave away our position. He winced slightly as she applied the antiseptic. Nobody was seriously hurt on our side. Can't say the same for two of Finley's men. The matter-of-fact way he referenced the violence was a stark reminder of the differences in their experiences. In Boston, such events would have been shocking newspaper headlines. Here, they were simply part of life. "You don't approve," Yates observed, watching her expression. "It's not my place to approve or disapprove," she said, securing the bandage. "I'm simply unaccustomed to such directness about these matters." "The West doesn't allow for much artifice," he said. "Life and death are more immediate here. It can be harsh, but there's honesty in that harshness." Olivia considered his words as she gathered the medical supplies. "I'm beginning to understand that, and to see value in it, despite the dangers." Something like satisfaction crossed his face. "You're adapting quicker than most Easterners. Necessity is a powerful motivator." She hesitated, then added softly, as is finding something worth adapting for. Their eyes met, and the kitchen suddenly seemed too small, too warm. Yates stood, breaking the moment. "Thank you for tending my arm," he said, his voice lower than before, "and for your concern." "Of course," she replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "We can't have the ranch owner incapacitated. Who would sign my wages?" The jest achieved its purpose, lightening the mood. Yates smiled and bid her good night, leaving Olivia to wonder at the complicated emotions swirling within her: relief, attraction, and a growing attachment that both thrilled and frightened her. As the fourth week of Olivia's employment began, Mrs. Larson announced her intention to reduce her visits to twice weekly. "These old bones need more rest," she declared over breakfast. "And you've proven yourself more than capable in the kitchen, Miss Kane." "I've had an excellent teacher," Olivia replied, touched by the older woman's confidence in her. "Nonsense. You've got natural talent and good sense, a rare combination." Mrs. Larson glanced meaningfully at Yates. "Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Sloane?" "Without question," he said, meeting Olivia's eyes briefly before returning to his coffee. "Miss Kane has transformed the Elkhorn in just a month's time." The praise warmed her, as did the knowledge that her trial period had passed successfully. Yet with success came a new uncertainty. If she was no longer proving herself, what defined her relationship with Yates now? That question lingered as she worked through the morning, reorganizing the pantry and planning meals for the coming week. The ranch's rhythm had become familiar: breakfast before dawn for the hands, Yates dividing the day's work, meals punctuating long hours of labor, and evenings spent in various pursuits from card games to repairs. Olivia had found her place within this rhythm, yet something had shifted since the posse's return. Yates sought her company more frequently, finding reasons to consult her on matters that previously wouldn't have warranted discussion. Their evening conversations on the porch had lengthened, ranging from books they had read to dreams they still harbored. Each such interaction left Olivia more confused about the nature of their relationship. Employer and employee, friends, or something neither of them had named. Her thoughts were interrupted by Jenkins appearing at the kitchen door, hat in hand. "Miss Kane, wagons arrived from town with those supplies you ordered." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins." She wiped her hands on her apron. "I'll come see to it." Outside, a young man was unloading crates from a wagon while consulting a list. He looked up as Olivia approached, his face breaking into a smile that seemed overly familiar. "Miss Kane, I'm Billy Thompson. My pa owns the freight company. He extended a hand. Heard a lot about you from folks in town. Have you indeed? Olivia said neutrally, accepting the brief handshake. All good things, he assured her, though his appraising gaze suggested otherwise. Pa said I should invite you to the harvest dance next Saturday. Whole town'll be there. That's very kind, but I don't believe Mr. Sloane mentioned any dance. Probably figured you wouldn't be interested in such country affairs, Billy said with a dismissive wave. But a pretty lady like yourself shouldn't miss out on the social events. I'd be happy to escort you. Before Olivia could formulate a polite refusal, Yates's voice came from behind her. The harvest dance slipped my mind, Miss Kane. My apologies. He stepped beside her, nodding briefly to Billy. Thompson. Sloane. The young man's demeanor cooled noticeably. Just extending an invitation to Miss Kane here. Very neighborly of you, Yates said, his tone suggesting it was anything but. But as it happens, Miss Kane will be attending with me as my household manager. Billy's eyebrows rose. Is that what they're calling it these days? Olivia felt Yates stiffen beside her. You should finish unloading those supplies, Thompson. Your father doesn't appreciate delays on deliveries. The warning in his voice was unmistakable. Billy shrugged, though his expression remained insolent. Just being friendly. No harm in that. After he departed, Olivia turned to Yates. That was unnecessary. I'm perfectly capable of declining invitations. I'm aware, he said, still watching the departing wagon. But Thompson has a reputation for not taking no for an answer, especially from women he considers available. And am I not available? She challenged, unsure why his presumption irritated her so much. Yates finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. That depends on what you want, Olivia. The use of her first name, still rare enough to catch her attention, combined with the intensity of his gaze, sent heat spreading through her body. I don't know what I want, she admitted quietly. Then perhaps we should discover that together. He took a step closer. Starting with the harvest dance, if you're willing. It wasn't quite a request for courtship, yet it felt like more than a casual invitation. Olivia searched his face, finding sincerity in his steady gaze. I would like that, she finally said. A smile transformed his features. Good. It's settled then. As he walked away to attend to ranch business, Olivia wondered what exactly had been settled. The dance was a week away, and she found herself anticipating it with a mixture of excitement and trepidation that suggested this outing held significance beyond a simple social event. The week passed in a flurry of preparations. Mrs. Larson helped Olivia refashion her best dress, a emerald green silk that had been too formal for daily ranch life, into something suitable for a country dance. They lowered the neckline slightly, removed excessive trim, and adjusted the bustle to a more modest profile. You'll be the belle of the dance, Mrs. Larson declared as Olivia tried on the altered gown. Though I suspect Mr. Sloane would think so if you wore sackcloth. Mrs. Larson. Olivia protested, blushing. Oh, don't play coy with me, child. I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The older woman adjusted the bodice. And how you look back. It's complicated, Olivia sighed. I'm his employee, P. Shaw. You're a lady of quality helping manage his household because circumstances required it. Mrs. Larson pinned a loose seam. Besides, half the marriages out here start with practical arrangements. Romance follows when it's meant to. Who said anything about marriage? Olivia asked, alarmed. Mrs. Larson just chuckled. Time will tell. Now stand still while I fix this hem. The night of the dance arrived clear and cool, with a full moon illuminating the landscape as Yates drove the buggy toward town. Olivia sat beside him, acutely aware of his proximity and the occasional glances he cast her way. You look beautiful, he said as they approached the lights of Sweetwater. "That color suits you." "Thank you," she replied, grateful for the darkness that hid her blush. Mrs. Larson was quite insistent about the alterations. "I'll have to thank her." His voice held a warmth that sent a pleasant shiver through her despite the evening chill. The town hall had been transformed with harvest decorations, corn stalks, pumpkins, and paper lanterns, creating a festive atmosphere. A small band played lively tunes in one corner while townspeople of all ages filled the dance floor. Their entrance did not go unnoticed. Conversations paused briefly as curious eyes assessed them, and Olivia heard whispers follow in their wake. Yates seemed unbothered, guiding her with a light hand at the small of her back toward where Sheriff Reeves and his wife stood. "Sloane," the sheriff greeted. "Good to see you in town for something other than a posse." He nodded respectfully to Olivia. "Miss Kane, I've heard good things about your management of the Elkhorn." "All true," Yates said before she could respond. "The ranch runs smoother than ever under her guidance." Mrs. Reeves, a handsome woman with kind eyes, smiled at Olivia. "I'm glad you've come to the dance. New faces are always welcome in Sweetwater, especially ones that bring such positive changes to old bachelors like Yates here." "Martha," the sheriff chided gently. "Oh, hush, John. Everyone's thinking it. I'm just saying it." She took Olivia's arm. "Come meet some of the other ladies while these two discuss whatever pressing sheriff business can't wait for Monday." Before Olivia could protest, she found herself being introduced to a circle of women who greeted her with varying degrees of warmth. Mrs. Wilson was among them, her smile tight but civil. "We were just discussing the school fundraiser," Mrs. Reeves explained. "Sweetwater's growing fast enough that we need a second classroom and another teacher." "A worthy cause," Olivia said sincerely. "Do they have proper accounting for the funds?" asked a thin woman introduced as the milliner's wife. "My Harold says money has a way of disappearing when committees get involved." "We're still organizing the committee," Mrs. Wilson said, a defensive note in her voice. "Miss Kane has experience with bookkeeping," Mrs. Reeves offered. "Perhaps she could advise us." The conversation shifted to the practical aspects of fundraising, and Olivia found herself drawn in despite her initial discomfort. These women might gossip, but they were also building a community from scratch, facing challenges that eastern cities had resolved generations ago. When Yates appeared at her side some time later, Olivia was surprised to realize nearly an hour had passed. "May I claim this dance?" he asked, extending his hand as the band began a waltz. "Certainly," she replied, aware of the speculative glances from the women as she placed her hand in his. Yates led her to the dance floor with confident steps. When his arm encircled her waist, pulling her closer than Boston propriety would allow, Olivia's breath caught. "Is this too forward?" he murmured, seeming to sense her reaction. "No," she replied truthfully. "Just different from what I'm accustomed to." "The West has its own rules of propriety," he said, guiding her smoothly through the turn. "Less rigid, perhaps, but no less meaningful." "I'm beginning to appreciate that difference," she admitted. They moved together with surprising ease, as if they had danced many times before. Olivia gradually relaxed into his hold, allowing herself to enjoy the music, the movement, and the warmth of his hand against her back. "You dance well for a cowboy," she teased. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a smile. "Said no child of hers would embarrass a lady on a dance floor. She taught you well." "She taught me many things." His expression turned more serious, "including to recognize quality when I see it." The compliment, simply stated but profound in implication, left Olivia momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, the music ended, and polite applause filled the hall. The remainder of the evening passed in a pleasant blur of dances, conversations, and shared glances that seemed to convey more than words could express. By the time they departed, Olivia felt a subtle but significant shift had occurred between them, a mutual acknowledgement of possibilities neither had openly discussed. The drive back to the ranch was quiet, the night air cool but not uncomfortable. Olivia found herself leaning slightly toward Yates, drawn to his warmth and the sense of security his presence provided. "Did you enjoy the evening?" he asked as the ranch buildings came into view. "Very much," she replied. "More than I expected to, even with Mrs. Wilson's barely concealed disapproval." Olivia laughed softly. "Even with that, Mrs. Reeves more than compensated with her kindness." "Martha Reeves is one of the finest women in the territory," Yates agreed. "She's offered true friendship if you want it." "I do," Olivia realized. "I've missed having female companions." He guided the buggy to a stop before the main house. "Olivia," he began, then paused, seeming to search for words. "These past weeks, having you at the Elkhorn has changed things." "For the better, I hope," she said, pulse quickening. "Very much so." He turned to face her fully. "What began as a practical arrangement has become something I value far more than I anticipated." In the moonlight, his features were cast in silver and shadow, but his eyes remained clear and intent on hers. "I feel the same," Olivia admitted softly. Yates reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "I don't want to presume, but I find myself hoping that your position here might evolve into something more permanent, for reasons that have little to do with bookkeeping or cooking." The declaration, though carefully phrased, sent a wave of emotion through her. "Are you offering me a different position, Mr. Sloane?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "That would be presumptuous after only a month's acquaintance. But I am asking permission to court you properly, with honorable intentions." The formal request, so at odds with the casual ways of the West he had described, touched Olivia deeply. Here was a man who understood her need for clarity and respect, even as he invited her into a new chapter of life. "I would like that very much," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. The smile that spread across his face was worth every hardship that had brought her to this moment. Slowly, giving her ample time to withdraw if she wished, Yates leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss both gentle and promising. When they parted, Olivia felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, a sense of rightness and belonging she had never expected to find in this wild country. "We should go inside," Yates said reluctantly. "Dawn comes early, regardless of harvest dances." He helped her down from the buggy, but instead of releasing her hand immediately, he brought it to his lips for a final kiss. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Yates," she replied, her heart too full for more elaborate words. As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia thought of how drastically her circumstances had changed in just over a month. From desperate job seeker to respected household manager to a woman being courted by one of the territory's most eligible men, it seemed almost too fortuitous to be real. Yet the challenges had been real enough: the bandits, the stagecoach robbery, the initial disappointment upon arrival. She had earned this happiness through perseverance and adaptability, qualities she hadn't known she possessed until necessity demanded them. The autumn days that followed took on a golden quality that matched the changing leaves. Yates's courtship proceeded with a blend of traditional gestures and practical companionship uniquely suited to their circumstances. Flowers appeared on her desk, handpicked from the riverside. Their evening conversations expanded to include personal histories and future aspirations. Riding lessons continued, with Olivia gradually gaining confidence on horseback. Most significantly, they began taking Sunday drives to beautiful spots on the ranch property, sometimes with a picnic prepared by Olivia, other times simply to watch the sunset from a favorite ridge. During one such outing in late October, as they sat on a blanket overlooking a valley ablaze with autumn colors, Yates broached a subject they had both avoided. "Winter comes early in these mountains," he said, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. "The first serious snow could arrive any day." "Mrs. Larson has been teaching me to prepare," Olivia replied. "We've been preserving vegetables and smoking meat all week." "You've adapted remarkably well," he observed. "But winter changes everything here. Travel becomes difficult, sometimes impossible. The ranch becomes isolated for days or weeks at a time." Olivia sensed the direction of his thoughts. "You're concerned about propriety, among other things." He shifted to face her directly. "The boundaries between us have been evolving. In town, with winter approaching, people are talking." "Let them talk," Olivia said with more bravado than she felt. "We know the truth of our relationship." "Do we?" His question hung in the air between them. "I know what I feel, Olivia. These past weeks have confirmed what I began to suspect that first day, that you are the woman I want to share my life with. But I've hesitated to speak plainly, not wanting to rush you." Her heart thundered in her chest. "And now winter is coming, bringing complications for an unmarried woman living under my roof." He took her hands in his. "But more importantly, I find I can no longer imagine the Elkhorn or my future without you in it." Understanding dawned. "Yates Sloane, are you proposing marriage?" "Inelegantly, perhaps," he acknowledged with a wry smile. "But yes, I love you, Olivia Kane. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had begun to anticipate this moment, the reality of it still overwhelmed her. Tears pricked at her eyes as emotion welled up. "I came to Wyoming seeking employment," she said, her voice thick. "I never imagined I would find a home, a purpose, and love." She squeezed his hands. "Yes, Yates, I will marry you." His kiss was different this time, deeper, filled with promise and a carefully restrained passion that sent heat coursing through her. When they finally parted, both breathless, his eyes held a darkened intensity that made her shiver despite the autumn warmth. "Soon," he murmured, touching his forehead to hers. "Before the first snow." They agreed on a small ceremony 2 weeks hence, with only the ranch hands, Mrs. Larson, and a few close friends from town as witnesses. News of their engagement spread quickly through Sweetwater, generating a flurry of responses ranging from hearty congratulations to barely concealed surprise at the speed of their courtship. "People will talk regardless," Mrs. Reeves assured Olivia when she came to town to order fabric for a wedding dress. "They talked when you arrived as his employee, they'll talk when you become his wife, and they'll find something new to gossip about by spring." "I suppose that's human nature everywhere," Olivia replied, selecting a rich ivory satin. "Indeed. But out here, survival depends on community, so the gossip rarely has real teeth." Mrs. Reeves examined a bolt of lace. "This would complement the satin beautifully." As they discussed wedding preparations, Olivia found herself drawn into the circle of Sweetwater's established women in a way she hadn't been before. Even Mrs. Wilson offered grudging felicitations and advice about managing a ranch household through the harsh Wyoming winter. Back at the Elkhorn, preparations took on a different nature. Yates worked with the hands to ensure winter provisions for the cattle were secured. Jenkins oversaw repairs to outbuildings, and Olivia inventoried household supplies, determining what additional items they would need before snow isolated them. "You're taking to ranch life better than most city women," Jenkins observed as he helped her load supplies into the storeroom. Some come out here thinking it's all romance and adventure, then flee back east at the first blizzard. I have no intention of fleeing, Olivia assured him, though I admit I'm somewhat apprehensive about the winter conditions. Boston has snow, but nothing like what you've described. You'll manage fine, he said with unexpected gentleness. You've got grit, Miss Kane, and Yates. Well, I've known him 8 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. The simple observation touched her deeply. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for everything, including that letter that brought me here, misunderstanding and all, he chuckled. Best mistake I ever made, seems like. The wedding day dawned crisp and clear, with just a hint of snow in the air, nature's reminder that their timing was fortuitous. Olivia dressed in her newly made gown with Mrs. Larson's help, the older woman fussing over every detail with maternal care. Something borrowed, Mrs. Larson said, fastening a delicate silver brooch to Olivia's bodice. My mother wore this on her wedding day in Virginia, 60 years ago. It's beautiful, Olivia said, touching the intricate design. Thank you for sharing it with me. You've become like a daughter to me these past months, the older woman admitted, her usually gruff voice softening. Seeing you and Yates together gives this old heart joy. Tears threatened, and Olivia blinked them back. You've been my anchor here, Mrs. Larson. I couldn't have adapted without your guidance. A knock at the door interrupted their emotional moment. Jenkins stood there, hat in hand. Preacher's ready, Miss Kane, he said. And the boss is looking mighty nervous. Olivia laughed. Tell him I'll be right down. The ceremony took place in the Elkhorn's main room, transformed by Mrs. Larson and the ranch wives into a space of simple elegance. Evergreen boughs and late-blooming wildflowers decorated the mantel and windows, and candles created a warm glow throughout. When Olivia descended the stairs, every head turned. But she had eyes only for Yates, standing tall and handsome in a new black suit, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to wonder as he beheld her. Jenkins offered his arm to escort her, an honor Olivia had requested in recognition of his role in bringing them together. As they approached, she saw Yates swallow hard, his composure momentarily slipping to reveal the depth of his emotion. The preacher from Sweetwater's small church spoke the traditional words, but Olivia would later remember little beyond the steady pressure of Yates's hands holding hers, and the clear certainty in his voice as he recited his vows. I, Yates William Sloane, take you, Olivia Margaret Kane, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. When her turn came, Olivia's voice remained steady despite the emotion swelling within her. I, Olivia Margaret Kane, take you, Yates William Sloane, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. The simple gold band Yates placed on her finger had been his mother's. He had told her earlier a tangible connection to the family she would never meet, but whose values had shaped the man she loved. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife, the preacher declared. You may kiss your bride. The cheer that went up from the assembled ranch hands as Yates claimed her lips made Olivia laugh against his mouth. He joined her laughter, wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her briefly off her feet in an exuberant embrace that spoke volumes about the joy he could no longer contain. The celebration that followed was boisterous and heartfelt. The hands had prepared a feast under Mrs. Larson's supervision, and someone produced a fiddle for dancing. Sheriff Reeves and his wife presented them with a handcrafted quilt, while Jenkins and the Hands pooled their resources to gift them a fine clock for the mantel. As evening approached, the guests gradually departed with knowing smiles and good-natured jests that made Olivia blush despite her best efforts at composure. When the last buggy disappeared down the drive, Yates closed the door and turned to her with an expression that sent a shiver of anticipation through her body. "Mrs. Sloane," he said, the name rolling off his tongue like a caress. "At last we're alone." "So we are, Mr. Sloane," she replied, struggling to maintain a semblance of calm despite the rapid beating of her heart. He crossed to her in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms. "I've been wanting to do this properly all day," he murmured before claiming her lips in a kiss, unlike their previous exchanges, deep, passionate, and uninhibited by the constraints of propriety that had governed their courtship. Olivia responded with equal fervor, months of carefully banked desire finally finding expression. When they eventually parted, both were breathing heavily, and the look in Yates's eyes made her knees weak with anticipation. "Shall we retire?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Words failing her, Olivia simply nodded. Their wedding night was everything she had dared to hope for: tender, passionate, and transformative. Yates proved as considerate a lover as he was a man, guiding her through initial uncertainties with patient instruction, until pleasure overcame hesitation. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Olivia marveled at how completely her life had changed in the span of 2 months. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That when I asked for a job in your kitchen, I never imagined this outcome," she replied honestly. He chuckled, the sound reverberating through his chest beneath her ear. "When I told you I needed a wife more than a cook, I wasn't actually proposing. Yet here we are. Do you regret it?" she asked, suddenly needing reassurance. Yates shifted to look directly into her eyes. "Not for a single moment. Meeting you was the best fortune of my life, Olivia Sloane." The new name sent a thrill through her. "I love you," she whispered, the words still fresh and wondrous on her lips. "And I love you," he replied, sealing the declaration with a kiss that promised a lifetime of such moments to come. The first significant snowfall arrived 3 days later, transforming the landscape into a white wonderland that sparkled beneath the winter sun. Olivia stood at the bedroom window, wrapped in a quilt, watching ranch hands clear paths between buildings. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Yates said, coming to stand behind her and slipping his arms around her waist. "Breathtaking," she agreed, leaning back against his chest. "Though somewhat intimidating as well." "We're well prepared," he assured her. "And now we have the perfect excuse to stay indoors by the fire for days on end." She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. "Is that your plan for the winter, Mr. Sloane, to keep me by the fireside?" "Among other places," he replied, his expression making it clear exactly what other places he had in mind. Olivia laughed and stretched up to kiss him, still marveling at the freedom to do so whenever she wished. "I believe I could be persuaded to embrace such a plan." The winter months passed in a comfortable rhythm of work and intimacy. Despite the snow, ranch operations continued. Cattle needed feeding, horses required care, and endless maintenance tasks occupied the daylight hours. Olivia settled into her role as the mistress of Elkhorn Ranch, managing the household with increasing confidence while continuing to maintain the account books that had first demonstrated her value. Evenings belonged to her and Yates alone, sometimes spent reading aloud by the fire, sometimes engaged in spirited chess matches or discussions of ranch improvements, and always ending in the shared warmth of their bed, where they continued to discover new dimensions of pleasure in each other's arms. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and revealing the first green shoots beneath, Olivia had news of her own to share. They were riding together, checking fence lines damaged by winter storms, when she decided the moment had come. Reining in her horse, she was quite proficient now. Olivia waited for Yates to notice and turn back. "Is something wrong?" he asked, concern immediately creasing his brow. "Not at all," she assured him. "But I have something to tell you, and this seems like the perfect place." They had stopped near the ridge where he had proposed their special spot with its panoramic view of the ranch and distant mountains. Dismounting, Yates helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. "What is it?" Olivia took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite her certainty that the news would bring him joy. "I visited Dr. Miller in town last week when you thought I was shopping with Mrs. Reeves." Alarm flashed across his face. "Are you ill?" "Quite the opposite." She took his hand and placed it gently against her still flat abdomen. "I'm carrying your child, Yates, due in late September according to the doctor." For a moment he stood perfectly still, his expression one of stunned disbelief. Then, with a whoop that startled the horses, he lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle. "A baby," he said when he finally set her down, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." "Are you pleased?" she asked, though his reaction had removed any doubt. "Pleased?" He laughed, the sound echoing across the valley. "Olivia, you've made me the happiest man in the Wyoming Territory twice now." He placed his hand reverently on her stomach again. "A family of our own." "The beginning of one," she corrected, covering his hand with hers. "I hope for several children, actually." "As many as you wish to give me," he said, drawing her close. "Though perhaps we should master caring for one before discussing a brood." They lingered on the ridge, planning and dreaming until the setting sun reminded them of duties waiting at the ranch. As they rode home side by side, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived desperate and alone, seeking merely employment in a strange man's kitchen. Instead, she had found a husband, a home, and a future richer than anything she could have imagined in Boston. "What are you smiling about?" Yates asked as they approached the ranch buildings. "I was just thinking," Olivia replied, "that when you said you needed a wife more than a cook, you might have been wiser than either of us knew." He reached across the space between their horses to clasp her hand. "The wisest decision I ever made was asking you to stay, Olivia Sloane. Everything good in my life now flows from that moment." As they rode into the yard, where ranch hands called greetings and Mrs. Larson waved from the porch, Olivia felt a profound sense of belonging. This place, this life was truly her home now, and the child growing within her would be born into a legacy of love that had begun with a simple request for employment and an unexpected response that had changed everything. "I need a wife more than a cook," he had said that first day. And now she was both and so much more: partner, lover, future mother of his children, and mistress of the Elkhorn Ranch. The journey from desperate job seeker to beloved wife had been swift but profound, transforming not just her circumstances, but her very understanding of what home and family could mean. As Yates helped her dismount and pulled her into a brief embrace before the watching ranch hands, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that she had found exactly where she belonged, not in a kitchen as she had originally intended, but in the heart and life of the man who had seen her true worth from the very beginning.